Right here.
Way around.
Right here.
You figured it out.
Yes. I'm ready to go for this
Thank you.
Come on, mommy. So this is my son. And that's my daughter. It's my daughter. Okay, next to me. Next other side, please.
Now step up so you get your height. There you go.
I'm already up, Mr.
You're
Mayor.
already. Oh,
Yes.
She's not as tall as you.
No. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Tazeen Azad, and I'm a Brooklynite and parent of 3 children right here. And also, I am the PA president here in this school. I am also a 2-time applicant family for appeals process and enrollment. And as of today, I'm thrilled that my family will never have to go through this again. My son is entering the 8th grade, and my daughter here is entering the 6th grade in IS 62. And I know it's time-consuming and stressful, and the middle school process can be. We went through the appeals round for my son 3 years ago, and that's how I got into this school, MS 890. It's a wonderful school. It offers a variety of programs for children. It has a supportive administration, school administration, that, and also it has a diverse school teaching staff that reflects the students of the school, of the city, and also of this neighborhood. The struggle was worth it, definitely, getting into this school, but it took a big toll on me. Many days I had to struggle taking care of this little one and family. You see the struggle, right? And attending the open houses and all those other sort of processes for application process. Some parents that I know from this neighborhood put aside their traveling plans, their house moving plans, just to get through this whole process. Even for me, I'm a super involved parent and also very active. It was very time consuming, and it was a very long process for me and hard to understand. And the idea that I would have to go through this process again for high school come next year is also a daunting idea. If things were challenging for me, imagine how it might be for immigrant communities or those who are doing it for the first time. Things need to be simpler, and starting today, they will be. This coming year, my son will be applying to high school. As we look for all these new options in the city, and wonderful options in this city, now I'm looking forward to one less thing to be less stressful about, and because I know this will be one simple process, and that's a big relief. I want to thank the mayor and the chancellor for listening to the parents and making our lives a little bit more easier. And I will have the big honor and the privilege to introduce Mayor de Blasio.
Thank you. Well, Tazeen, you just showed us something we call multitasking. I was very impressed that you could do all that simultaneously. Very impressive. Tazeen, thank you for talking about to all parents what it means to have a simpler admission process, but thank you especially, Tazeen, for all you do as the PA president here. Let's give her a round of applause for all she does. I want to thank everyone here at MS 890. I want to thank the principal, Nicholas Frangella, and the whole team here at MS 890. Let's give them a round of applause. And to all the parent leaders and activists who are gathered here from all over Brooklyn, maybe all over the city even, thank you all for all you do. Give each other a round of applause. Thank you. And special thank you to our Deputy Chancellor for Early Child Education and Student Enrollment, Josh Wallach, for his hard work on this. Thank you, Josh. So we are just a few weeks from the opening of school. And Tazeen helped us all to remember what parents have to juggle, literally, all the time in their lives. And parents have for a long time said, isn't there a better way? Isn't there some easier way to do our admissions to middle schools and high schools? And it's been frustrating, and I knew it when I was a parent. But one of the things that we've focused on, and the Chancellor in particular is focused on, is going out and listening to parents and asking them what would make their lives better, what would make their kids' lives better. And we had a series of town hall meetings with parent leaders and activists in the spring. A lot of really important ideas came out of that. A lot of inspiration came out of that to do some new things. This is one of the ideas that has been coming up for a long time. How could we make it simpler? How could we make it better? And what we found was that some of what we had done in the past for younger kids could work for all kids. A simpler, more straightforward admissions process, more parent-friendly, more user-friendly, could work for everyone. So today we're going to announce just that we are making big changes in the middle school and high school admissions process, and that going forward, brace yourselves, it's actually going to be simple to apply to schools for your kids for the first time in a long time, right?
Yes.
We're going to make it simple. There will be fewer deadlines. There will be less paperwork. There will be more transparency. You'll be able to get an update online or with a simple phone call to know what's going on with your child's application. Obviously, these are things that should have been done a long time ago, but we finally found a way to do it that really can work for the parents and the kids of this city. So I will just take you on a little trip of my own down memory lane. I remember the process I went through with my two kids for middle school and high school, and I remember it was nerve-wracking. I remember there was a lot of time where you didn't know what was really going on, and a lot of times when it wasn't clear what the next steps were. And so, like every parent, I'd go talk to other parents and say, well, what are you experiencing? And then they would be even more nervous, and we'd all share being nervous and confused together. And everyone dreaded the process, but it was the only one we had. It shouldn't be that way. One of the things that we've really focused on with my team is the fact that parents go through a lot of stress. And we want to make it less stressful. We want to make parenting easier. This is a tough city to be a parent in. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of challenges. One of the things we learned from the pre-K experience was parents were so grateful when something was finally simple, when they knew there was a seat for their child and there was an easy way to apply and you got help figuring out where the right seat was. Parents talked about how it took a lot of stress out of their lives. It took a lot of uncertainty out of their lives. We want to keep doing that on every level. And this is one of the next great frontiers, because we know with a simpler process, we can get really good results for kids and parents, but take away that stress. So to the parents of New York City, we hear you, we heard you. We know you went through a lot of frustration, a lot of confusion. We want those days to be in the past. This new system is going to make things a lot easier. We're going to get the update from the Chancellor on how it works. I'm told there's a sample form in here. Josh, is this the sample form?
Yes.
Yes.
This? All right, good. Wow. Here's what the new form will look like.
Whoa.
It's, well, I'm going to show all of you. It's simple.
Shorter. Yes, thank you.
So, imagine a form that's easy to fill out. This is a real innovation here in New York City. This is what it's going to look like going forward. And the important point for parents to recognize, for middle school and high school admissions, you'll fill out this form once, one time. And then everything will come from this, and the process will go forward in a way that you can actually track. And that's what's so powerful. In the lead up to today, asked my colleagues, asked the Chancellor and his team, the questions that parents would ask. How do you get your first choices? If you don't get your first choices, how do you go on a wait list? If you're on a wait list, how do you know what your standing is on the wait list? If the wait list changes, how often is it updated? And again, you'll hear some of the details, but I think everyone will be pleased. For example, the wait list, if you're on a wait list for a school, It will be updated online literally every time there's a single action for a student.
Wow.
So if your kid is number 15 on the wait list for a school they want to get into, and a child is taken from number 1 off the wait list, it will automatically reset, and your child goes from 15 to 14.
That's great.
It will be in real time, the kind of thing that honestly, and Richard, I hope you appreciate this point, would have been unimaginable a few years ago at the Department of Education. The concept of real-time information was very, very foreign. It was not something any of us parents ever experienced. This is a 21st century reality where parents are going to be able to literally day-to-day get an update. So that's going to make all the difference in the world. And when parents want that information, they'll be able to go online at myschools.nyc, or they'll be able to call 311, or if they want to meet in person with an enrollment specialist, they can go to a family welcome center. So things are going to be a lot simpler, a lot more facilitated. You'll hear from the Chancellor again on the details, but I want to just emphasize the meaning of this. We want every child to have opportunity. Everyone knows that truism, that historically education in this city, in this country, was distributed too often according to income, according to privilege, not according to ability. We have tried in everything we're doing with the Equity and Excellence vision to make sure that every child has equal opportunity to a great education, beginning with early childhood. Beginning at the very beginning by making pre-K universal, and soon 3K. By the way, September, on that opening day of school, 20,000 kids will be in 3K. So a big step towards 3K being universal. So if we want a system that's really fair, if we want opportunity for all, we have to make it work, and we have to make it simple. Because a lot of times, parents and kids didn't even apply to schools that might have been the right one for them, because they didn't understand the process or they found it too hard to navigate. We want those days to be gone. We think a fair process, a simple process, a transparent process also helps us to have the fairness and the equity that we believe in this city. So it's another step toward the day, that goal we're fighting for in education, in everything we do, to be the fairest big city in America. This is an important step. This is a step that's going to reach hundreds of thousands of families every single year, and it's a really good day for those families. Now, I just want to say a few words in Spanish. Como padre de familia, sé lo difícil que puede ser el proceso de ingreso a la escuela intermedia y secundaria. Hoy estamos haciéndolo más difícil y menos frustrante para padres y estudiantes. A partir de este año, solo hay que llenar un formulario, solamente un proceso de solicitud. One application will do it. One form, and the kids are off to their futures. With that, happy to bring up the Chancellor. I want to thank him. After a year plus on the job, he has really shown that a lot of things can change at the Department of Education. I love our educators, but we all know Department of Education has often been mired in bureaucracy. This Chancellor is someone who cuts through the bureaucracy, thinks from the parent perspective, makes things happen. My honor to welcome Chancellor Richard Carranza.
Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I also want to thank all of the CEC presidents from across Brooklyn and the city, and all the parent representatives are here today. I want you to know that the mayor is absolutely right. We've heard you. I also want to recognize a parent who I see at many forums, and you saw her today multitasking. She does this all the time and represents her community beautifully. So I want to thank Tazeen Azad again for your comments. Thank you. And our principal, Nicholas, thank you for having us in your space. It's a beautiful space. And I also want to add my chorus to the thanks to our Deputy Chancellor, Josh Wallach, who he and his team have done incredible work to bring this idea to fruition. So we're here to celebrate today, and it's an exciting day for families and students across New York City. A system this large, 1.1 million students in 1,800 schools, it can often be a frustrating and complicated valiant endeavor to enroll your child in school. And it shouldn't be. Schools should be easy to get into, and schools should be easy to enroll and know exactly where you are. So today, I'm excited to stand with our mayor and make middle and high school admissions a lot less complicated for our students. So here's what's going away. There will be no more second round for middle and high school admissions. No more second round. After you apply in the fall and get your offer in March for high school or April for middle school, we're not going to ask you to apply again. There will be no more learning 3 different systems and processes for enrolling your students. It used to be that pre-K and kindergarten admissions just had 1 round. Then middle school had 2 rounds, and then the second round was called the appeals round. But that wasn't complicated enough, because then in high school, the second round was called round 2, and it was different. It was a different kind of second round than the appeals round. And then I think we all agree that the complexity and complex equations should be left in math class where they belong, not in the enrollment process. So here's what we're going to do instead. It's a simpler process. It used to be that if you got, say, your 3rd choice for high school, you could apply again if you wanted, if your first and second choices had seats open and you had the time, the ability to do another round of paperwork. No more. But if they didn't have a round 2 seat that was open, you were out of luck. So now you'll be given a spot on the wait list for every school higher on your list than the one you got. You'll know your spot, and if the seats do open up, you get an offer. It's that simple. It's a faster process. That second application process took a lot of time. We heard that clearly from our parents. After you spent the whole fall making your list of 12 schools and submitting your application, and you got your offer in the spring, you had to spend more time going to school fairs and putting together another application. And then we'd send you the results in May or June. You'd get a new offer. It may be to one of the schools you really wanted, or not, or you wouldn't get anything at all. Now, there's no more waiting for the deadline. You'll learn in real time, as the mayor has shared, if you get a spot off the wait list. So just like you know when you go into your local meat market and you next in line, you will know if you're next in line. It should be that simple. And there's a human touch to this as well. You used to put that round 2 application or appeals round application into a black box. You crossed your fingers, you hoped, and you waited. Now, as Tazeen so thoughtfully has said, you can call up a school and talk to one of our wonderful secretaries or administrators. They'll tell you where you are in the wait list and whether the wait list is moving. And of course, as always, this isn't changing. If you have any hardships or concerns or any particular circumstances, you can go and talk to our wonderful staff at the Family Welcome Center, and they will help you. So, we're excited. This is why we're excited. We're making things easier for families, but the mayor and I have listened, and we've been very excited to hear from our families. And that's because we've heard you. So now let's talk about what's next. This is about making things easier for families, so we're going to make sure families know about this, wherever they are, however they get information, in their own language. So the form that the mayor showed everybody is available in all of our major languages in New York City. We have new information on our website, schools.nyc.gov, not tomorrow, not later, right now. It's on the website right now. We're also training our family welcome centers and school counselors so they can talk to families about this change. We'll be ready for our middle and high school fairs this fall when families really tune into this process. And we'll make sure that they know exactly what it's going to look like and how these changes will benefit them. And then let's talk about what's next after that. Because I know all of you are asking, you're making these admissions changes, but what about bigger changes to school choice? What about screens? I'm excited excited to have that conversation, and we're expecting a report from our independent Student Diversity Advisory Group on just that topic in the coming weeks. But today, let's celebrate this change. For our families, for our students, for our schools, for our community, this is a great day. It's a big deal. And I want to thank Mayor de Blasio for his leadership and partnership and holding us accountable to be responsive to our communities. Thank you, sir. And for everyone who's here today, who's helped make this happen, congratulations. Congratulations. Si me permiten unas palabritas en español también, estamos celebrando que hemos cambiado el proceso para inscribir a nuestros estudiantes en nuestras escuelas. Ya no tendrá la necesidad de una segunda ronda de aplicaciones. Van a poder asistir en su aplicación. Si no obtienen el primer, segundo, tercer opción, automáticamente van a estar en una lista de espera, y en esa lista de espera van a poder saber dónde quedan acerca de la selección que han hecho. Hay mucha más información, pero es un día de celebración y estamos muy orgullosos de que hemos escuchado las voces de nuestra comunidad, de nuestros padres de familia, para hacer el proceso más fácil y más sensible para todos. Thank you very, very much.
Sit down, make yourselves comfortable. Realize everyone's standing. I'm like, why are you standing there? Okay, questions on this announcement, then we'll go to other topics. Questions on this announcement?
Thank you.
Hey.
I'm curious, how many students don't get their first choice on their application? And until what time of the school year will you let the wait list keep changing? Because I'm just wondering if this could intensify a certain amount of musical chairs into September and October, and teachers could get hard time.
Thanks very much. So in answer to the first question, about half of our students get their top choice right now, and about 70% get one of their top 3 choices, and we don't anticipate that that will change in this process. We plan to stop this wait list process in September so that it does not go too far into the fall. And we'll be communicating that with families very clearly as we go through the process.
Yes, please, Jill.
What if a student gets into like their 4th choice or something, let's say, they're on the wait list for the top 3, but they've got like kind of long odds on that. In the old way it worked, for the second round, you could look through a booklet, see which schools had openings for round 2 and apply. Is it possible for a student under the new system to apply to a completely different school after round 1 or round only?
Yes, that's part of the idea here. That's right, round only. So a student will be able to look on myschools.nyc. They'll be able to see the situation across the system in all the schools, and they can add themselves to any wait list that they want to be added to at any point in the process.
And if I could just, for the mayor, you said this is something that probably should have happened a long time ago. The process has been really complicated and confusing for a long time. Why did it take until now, or what changed to make you see a way to do it?
Combination of things. I mean, it's always a good question, and the first answer is almost always because there was a whole series of big things we were trying to get done, and that's where the first time and energy had to go. Pre-K, 3K, AP for all, I mean, a whole host of major initiatives. But I think the other thing was experimentation. And these two can get into more detail. But for example, until we did Pre-K for all with a facilitated enrollment approach, we did not realize how much we could achieve with facilitated enrollment. Until we started experimenting with not having a round 2 and seeing what it would mean, we didn't realize how effective it could be to skip the round 2 and do it all simultaneously. Certainly continually seeing what we can do with technology. So I think this was having one part other key priorities, but another part having to keep experimenting to see if we could do it on this scale. This is a massive scale. But now I think everyone in the admissions process feels confident that we can make this work. And things like that real-time update, I mean, I would have, if someone said to me when we first came in, the DOE would be capable of doing that, I would have said as a parent, I'm not buying that. But I watched enough progress to now believe that we can actually keep that promise to parents and have those real-time updates. Please, oh wait, over here.
I was going to ask, how are the waiting lists going to be managed?
The waiting list will be will be assembled centrally. And then since we have now real-time data links between the schools and the central office, we'll be able to manage that together. So the schools will be able to make offers off their wait lists, and from the central office, we'll be able to monitor that process and make sure it's going well and fairly.
So how are they monitoring how schools are calling students off the list?
So we all have access to the same lists, and we can watch as principals make calls off that list and accept students into the schools. But it's a process that we've worked together on for many years, not with as good a technology solution as we have, and we've found that schools are great at communicating with families and at following the process that we set forth. But we'll have these real-time data links now that will really help us make sure it goes well.
And just to clarify something you said earlier, can parents add onto any wait list regardless of whether they listed that school in their initial 12?
Yes. Yes, so this is a more flexible system now. They'll be able to see, once they have their initial offer, they'll be able to add themselves to wait lists at whatever school they wish.
And what's the advantage of that?
They might see a school that they hadn't considered before that has an open seat that they become interested in. The idea is just to expand choices and opportunities for families to continue to explore as they go through the process.
Can you explain how and forgive me for those of us who don't have kids in the school system here, but how the second round worked? Would you have to start all over again, and how that goes away?
Yeah, so yes, in essence, you did. What happened was another sort of list of schools went out to families for those that could navigate and find it, of schools that had open seats. And then families would submit an entire new application, another whole form that they had to submit with a new list of choices. Then they waited for a couple of months, and then we sent them back a letter with that offer. As the chancellor said, sometimes it was one of the schools they wanted, sometimes it wasn't. So now what will change is, as the mayor and chancellor said, there'll be one form that's submitted at the beginning. Then they'll be able to see online how that process goes. They'll be automatically put on wait lists, so they won't have to do anything. And they'll be able to monitor the process as it goes and see what seats are becoming available where. It's much more user-friendly, and as the mayor and chancellor both pushed us towards, there'll be much more help along the way from our family welcome centers and from 311. As we learned in pre-K and 3K, people that are able to get on the phone earlier in the process and guide families through it, because really that personal interaction is what helps families navigate the process.
Yeah, I want to just pick up on that as a parent. So I've talked to a lot of parents about their experience with pre-K and 3K and actually having a human being to talk to. I think a lot of us are frustrated when there's no human interaction, when you're trying to get something done and you call like an automated line, and whether it is prescriptions or anything that you deal with in your life, insurance or whatever, where you're trying to get a human being to get clear answers, and it's really hard to do. And I think historically the DOE was one of these places too, where it was just really hard to get clear answers from a human. What we found during the pre-K process was a lot of times folks would look at the options and be really concerned that something wouldn't fit for their kid, or they'd think they could only go to an option in their own district. And the minute they got on the phone with an actual human being, and the person could say, no, wait, let's think about this. How do you go to work? Let's think about sites along your subway line. Let's think about sites near where you work instead of near your home. Maybe that's easier for you, whatever. And what we found was parents came back and said it was incredibly easier because they could get that help in the facilitation. So then when we've surveyed since on pre-K, we found a very high level of satisfaction with placements. And I think it directly relates to an easy system and having that human factor as well. Yes?
I'm wondering how the District 75 students fit into this. The students with really specific disabilities have the option of getting on wait lists and moving around this way.
So District 75 are students with individualized education programs, students with disabilities, special needs. That process will continue to be really heavily facilitated by a combination of our excellent committees on special education and our enrollment office. In some cases, they'll participate in this system, but in most cases, it will be an even more personalized approach with the help of the committees on special education guiding them to the program that's the best fit for them, given that IEP, or individualized education plan.
So they're not in this general...
It varies, but for the most part, I would just say, to keep it simple, the process for them will remain largely the same and will be personalized in the way that it should be and needs to be.
And I'm also wondering, with some of the districts that now have lotteries, like District 15, how does that fit in with this? But also, are you giving parents their lottery numbers? Like, if my student is ranked, 5 or 105 in the lottery, am I told that ranking?
So just to take your first question, in districts that have lottery processes, again, the family will get their offer, and then if there are higher ranked schools on their list, that they will be put on the wait list for those schools, and they'll be able to monitor their process as they go through that. In terms of lottery numbers, and this is sort of a technical term. It sort of happens on the back end, and as a rule, we want to keep this very simple for families, and so what we're going to tell them is the offer they got and where they are on wait lists for schools. Just the information about, just the information pertaining to the offer and the wait list.
The news you can use.
Yes, the news you can use. Thank you, sir.
Some parents have said that they wish they could know their actual lottery number. However the complicated algorithm works, they want to be able to compare what their other families got and whether they got high on their list.
Yep. I understand. Families are looking for information and want to understand the process better. And I think what we've done here is made it simpler and more transparent, so families will have more information, but it will be the news they can use. And if they have questions about how they got where they got, they'll be able to talk to a human being about that will be able to make sense of it with them. Thanks.
Go ahead, Tom.
How do schools with like a screen or selective entry, how do they like play into the wait list aspect? Because you may not meet the criteria or.
Right. So if you're applying to a program that has a screen or an audition, then you would and you didn't get in, you would only appear on the wait list if you met the screen or audition threshold for that program.
Okay. Yes, in the back.
How is it determined where you land on the wait list? And is there any indication of like how likely you are to get in other than just like what number you are on it?
Once the offers have gone out, it'll be easy to see from the wait list where you stand, and there isn't more to it than that. You'll know literally, as the Chancellor said, it's like going to a store and getting the ticket. You know what number you are, and you know how many folks are ahead of you, and you'll be able to watch the process go. You'll also be able to talk with an administrator in a school who can give you a sense of how much wait lists move each year, and that varies a bit by school. As far as where you land on a wait list, it will have to do with the specific priorities. Some schools have zones and some don't. Some have screens and some don't. And other than that, it's random and fair.
Other questions on this announcement? Looking around, going once, going twice. Other topics? Other topics, yes.
Mr. Mayor, two fairly concerning issues going on right now. The growing number of bicyclists that have died has reached 19, and a 9th cop killed himself this week. I'm just curious, I know that these are both issues that the city has responded to with initiatives and outreach and even funding in the case of the cyclists. At what point do you guys have to step back and say, what we're doing now is not working, it keeps happening, and kind of start over and look for new solutions for these two problems?
These are both unacceptable situations. In the case of what's happening with our cyclists, we have not seen something like this in recent years. The previous efforts under Vision Zero were clearly making steady progress for cyclists, for pedestrians. We believe fundamentally doing a lot more in the same vein will work, including the particular efforts focused on cyclists, like clearing the bike lanes with the PD enforcement, like creating more dedicated bike lanes and protected bike lanes. We believe it will make a huge difference, and we're going to move that very, very quickly. The suicides of our officers, it's extraordinarily painful. We have lost officers in the past, but this concentration is devastating. We're going to do everything conceivable to help officers and to stop this. We know, because it involves mental health issues, that it's complex. And there's many, many areas we're going to have to work on, but it begins with communication. and letting our officers know that help is available. I know the commissioner has sent out his own very personal messages to our officers. I did as well, to talk about suicide in my family and the fact that when someone doesn't feel they can ask for help, it leads to a horrible outcome for them and their family, and how important it is to know that help is always there. And we're going to keep spreading that message. The police department already has put in place a plan that every precinct will have peer counselors available, meaning fellow officers, fellow civilian members of the NYPD who will be available to help any officer immediately if they have any concern whatsoever. But there's a variety of other things we're going to do right away. I spoke to the commissioner this morning. He'll have more to say starting today. But for example, the issue that Chief Monahan raised, which was an issue that I had not heard previously, nor had the commissioner heard previously. But there is something different and better we can do with city health insurance to make sure there are more mental health providers who will take that city health insurance. That's something that we think we can resolve in a matter of days. Now that we see that problem, we can act on it quickly and make more options available to officers. A very substantial number of city employees do take advantage right now of mental health services through their city health insurance, but we obviously can do more. We're going to do that immediately. Also, the police department will have a clearer policy going forward on medications. One of the challenges is misinformation. A lot of officers got the impression that if you're on a medication to address a mental health issue, that somehow that could compromise your ability to serve as an officer. That is not true. There are a variety of medications that is perfectly appropriate to take if you're a police officer, if you're any number of other professions in this society. So we have to dispel that myth, make a policy very, very clear to our officers that if someone needs the assistance of mental health medication, that's a very normal, appropriate thing through a doctor's care. So that's an area where we can immediately help our officers to understand and have that access. And then there's going to be a variety of additional counseling and therapy options made available. The commissioner, again, will speak to the specifics, but there are things we're going to be doing right now. To your question, right now things that will happen in the next days to try to really get to the heart of this. And it begins with, and I ask all of you to spread this message, that there are a whole host of resources right now available to our officers. We need their families to understand that too, because one of the things we found with all our mental health work is sometimes it is the family member who calls in and gets the help for someone. We need everyone to look out for their partners and everyone they work with. That is the change that we have to achieve, and we're going to do it.
A follow-up on that. I mean, I've personally experienced suicidal ideation, and one of the things that helped me recently was like group therapy with several people who have experienced similar mental health problems. Is that going to be one of the types of therapy that you guys are going to offer?
To the best of my understanding, yes, and I will always tell you if I know the specifics of something or not, but I think the idea is to provide a whole host of options because different things work for different people. I want to thank you for offering your own personal example because I think that's part of how we change things. I know it's not easy to do. It wasn't easy, talking about my dad was something I had to think about for a long time as well before I could do it. But I do think, and I've learned this from some colleagues actually in public life who are very, very upfront about the challenges they've faced or their families have faced. Every time someone talks about it, it helps others to feel more comfortable because it's basically every family. One form or another, these challenges are in every single family. So I think you're right that kind of group setting, for some people, that's the single most effective way, and we want to make sure people have that access. Yes?
We talk about NYC Thrive, A1C, and people can call and get help. Are these the same providers that the NYPD would have access to, or they go through a different provider list through their insurance? Is that what you were referring to?
There's two different things, and we want people to get help anywhere that works for them. So, first of all, anybody in New York for themselves or for a loved one can call 888-NYC-WELL 24 hours and immediately get help. For example, if someone in your life you thought was having suicidal thoughts, it's not just that person themselves could call that number and get a counselor right then and there, but you could call and say, I need to know what to do. there's someone in my life I love and I don't like what I'm seeing. What should I do? You can call. Any family member, any friend can call. Or, of course, the person themselves can call. And you get immediate guidance, and if there's a next step that's needed right away, it happens right there on the phone. If something's urgent, then immediately, an intervention team is sent or 911 is called. If something is, you need a therapy appointment or something, they make the appointment whenever possible, literally right there on the phone. That's available to anyone. That's available to our police officers, our teachers, anybody, any New Yorker. But separately, there's the city employees who all have access to mental health services through insurance, because all of our city employees who have insurance, that includes mental health care. The point that was raised by Chief Monahan is an important one. Some of our employees were struggling to get the care they needed because providers told them they didn't take our insurance. We can fix that for a number of providers. Once that issue was raised, we saw an immediate fix that will help us give people a lot more options. And then the last part is within the police department, there are already a series of mental health initiatives and support initiatives, including these peer support folks in every single precinct and command. But we're going to broaden that with a variety of other counseling and therapy services. And we're also, and this is what the Commissioner and I have talked about several times, we've now increasingly understand there's some misunderstandings that have to be addressed, like this question of medication. No one should feel, this used to be a horrible thing in our society. If someone legitimately went and got help and they were prescribed a medication, then they were ostracized for getting help and using a medication, which is the most backwards idea in the world. You can go to a doctor, get an appropriate medication, and serve as a police officer. There's no contradiction. We need our officers to understand that, and we need to make that information available.
Because I've been in the process of searching for, I guess we all have somehow, for a different issue, but it seems like that the insurance, the providers, they're not taking insurances, even when they're PPOs. Everybody wants to out of pocket. They want you to pay up front first, and then you have to do the insurance. And for somebody who's struggling with a mental issue, it could be very upsetting not to have access right away to, so I think that the provider situation, if I may just say, is something very real in this industry.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so, first of all, anything that we can do, and we again think we have an immediate solution to just increase the number of providers who take the insurance and make it simpler for people. But you're still pointing out a much bigger issue, which I agree with you on, which is we do not want any barriers to care. If someone felt stymied trying to get care because of insurance dynamics, again, they can call 888 NYC Well and be directed to care that's immediately available in one form or another, because there are a lot of forms of care that do not put you through the complexities around insurance. But the other thing is, look, it obviously is a huge problem in this city, in this state, in this country, that mental health care is the stepchild of the healthcare system. And somehow, even though it's 1 in 5 American adults who suffer from a mental health challenge, there's not parity. This is debated all the time in Washington. It's well acknowledged. There is not parity between mental health care and physical health care in America. There needs to be. And part of why I believe in a universal health care system is the very same point you're making. If someone has a mental health challenge, even a few roadblocks are going to discourage them from getting help. The stigma is bad enough. If you get over the stigma, then it should be you have nothing else in your way, but we know the reality is in too many ways there still are other roadblocks. Okay, yes.
With the insurance, I know it's not just the providers not taking the city insurance, it's that the compensation rate is about $55 an hour when these therapists are charging $150 to $250 an hour. So first, I have a two-part question, but first specifically, is that being looked at being raised?
We are going to look at the whole equation. It begins with getting more providers involved. Obviously, anything we can do to get people more coverage, we want to. That part is a little more complicated, like where can we get to in terms of just sheer cost. But we still want to begin by just making a lot more providers available to folks and then try and find ways to reduce the cost. But again, the things I mentioned that the police department will do itself, those are obviously going to be options that are either affordable or free.
And then Councilmember Borelli told me yesterday that Thrive NYC pulled out of a mental health first aid training event for cops because it was sponsored by the pro-cop group Blue Lives Matter. In your email this morning that you referenced, you said that, quote, help is always here for you. So how do you square those two things?
Look, I'm going to just not speak to you about this because you are not the person who initiated this. I'm going to say it is a lie. It's a disgusting lie. It's entirely irresponsible. Starting with the councilman and going on to the editors at the Post who put that on the front page. It's disgusting. We have been losing police officers. This should be a somber, serious discussion, not a politicized discussion, not a cheap shot, not personality assassination. It's disgusting. We are ready to have mental health services, seminars, first aid with anyone, and that was made abundantly clear to the councilman. So, but it goes beyond this. Let's be honest. My wife has been trying to help people get mental health care for years now. And in a moment where the whole city should be unified trying to help our officers, the New York Post decides to politicize and take a cheap shot. That's disgusting. They should be ashamed of themselves.
Well, are you calling Councilman Borelli a liar?
I'm calling the New York Post a liar and Councilman Borelli a liar. It's just false. We made very clear we would happily have a mental health first aid course with that organization. That is not an issue. But to put that on the front page in the middle of a crisis is disgusting.
Okay, let me just
No, I'm done with you. Go ahead.
separate question.
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Mayor.
I'll come back to you.
Who I spoke to this
I'll come
morning
back to you. Go ahead.
Says that he can barely stay alive right now. You don't want
I'll
to
come back to you.
Mr. Mayor, I also spoke to Councilman Borelli, and he insists that this happened. He insists that what happened was they were all set to go, and he was told by people from Thrive that they did not want to have a flyer that had Thrive and Blue Lives Matter on the front page. What do you say to his on the record?
I'm saying he is playing a game. It's a lie. And of course, we would have mental health first aid with that organization. The question was whether it was for a limited group of people or for the general public. That's what brought up the issue. It was made abundantly clear. We would, of course, do mental health first aid with that organization. We could do that today. Anyone serious, not playing a political stunt, not playing games with people's lives, would have said, hey, how do we resolve this? And we would have resolved it readily.
So how do you want to resolve it now?
If they want to do mental health first aid, let's book it today. We are more than happy. We want anyone who's trying to serve our officers to have that opportunity. Got no problem in the world with that. Let's do it today. But stop the games. He's doing it for political advantage.
Because of the latest suicide.
No. Marcia, first of all, he has my phone number. If he had, this is where I always know people are playing a political game with things that are way too serious to do that with. And it's horrible and disrespectful to our officers, disrespectful to people in New York City. It's disrespectful to my wife who's trying to help people. It's disrespectful all around. If he thought a functionary was saying, oh, I can't do my mental health first aid, pick up the godforsaken phone and say, we've got a problem here, can we fix it? I would have said, yeah, we'll fix it right now. Not a question in the world. Melissa.
Mr. Mayor, back up in East Harlem today with the kids from the Jackie Robinson.
Yes.
Some very happy kids. I'm interested in whether that was your idea to deliver these special trips at the end of the summer. And
Yes.
also just, I wanted to ask you about what happened, because I think still a lot of the parents, they're very grateful for what you're doing
Yeah.
at this point, but if the failure to get the rats and the maggots cleaned up in this camp wasn't bad enough, the city also failed to relocate this camp for several weeks, causing parents a lot of inconvenience and the loss of daycare. What happened?
Yeah, this is just, I get sick to my stomach when I see something like this. I appreciate that you brought it up to begin with. And honestly, when you first brought it up, I said to people very clearly, this is a fixable situation, go fix it. And I want to be clear, NYCHA has a piece of this, and Department of Youth and Community Development has a piece of this. And the left hand and the right hand sure didn't do a good job fixing it. It's not shocking that there might be a building in New York City with a problem. Okay, we've got a lot of old buildings, we've got a lot of maintenance that wasn't done for years. That I could understand. You go and you find a new site. Now, there's some bureaucracy where the state has to sign off for something, I get it. But this was idiocy that this was not solved quickly. And the first time around, I chalked it up to, okay, people thought they were fixing it left hand, right hand. after your later reports, I was like, this is just idiotic. And I let people have a piece of my mind and told them we had to find a viable alternative immediately. And then more than that, we had to make it up to these kids and families. They came up with this package of new opportunities, which I think the kids are really happy about. But no, this is the kind of thing I wish I could say I'm shocked when bureaucracies manage to screw up something like this. I've seen it across a lot of agencies for many, many years. It's not acceptable. I won't tolerate it. It's not going to happen again. But what really bugs me the most, Melissa, was there was such an obvious fix, which is to move to a new location day one, just immediately. Immediately. Go ahead.
Mayor, knife seizures in city schools are up by 92% from 5 years ago, and the numbers have increased for each of those years. Just curious what you think might account for that rise, your thoughts on it.
So we've talked about this in the past, and the broad reality remains true, that the crime and violence in our schools has continued to go down overall. And that's the most important thing. I'm saying this as a parent. The most important thing is what's happening to our kids. The fact is that just like the city as a whole, crime and violence in the schools continues to go down. We've also changed the nature of school safety, like we've done with neighborhood policing. Overall, school safety has been retrained to engage students, to engage parents in a whole different way. So bluntly, a lot more information is flowing. A lot more people are helping school safety to know where those weapons are, and they're getting them. Every time one of our officers gets a weapon, we are, all of us, unhappy, sad, angry that that weapon was there. We're also very happy that weapon was gotten before anyone was hurt. So there's a lot more work to be done. And I think the deepening of the relationship between school safety and students and parents is crucial. And by the way, we talk about some much bigger dangers in our society today. And this is what the law enforcement experts always say to us. The way to stop violence of every form, including the things we fear the most for our children, is the ability of our officers to have the relationships that give them the information to stop something before it starts. So that's, I think, what we're seeing in many cases.
In terms of diversifying some of the specialized high schools, some alumni have called for expanding gifted and talented programs in underserved communities throughout the city, including the Public Advocate. What are your thoughts on taking a look at that?
Well, I'll start, and I imagine the Chancellor may have his views too. Look, we attempted change. Round one, it did not work. We've got to go back with a new approach, which we intend to do. But the underlying truth is still true in my view. The fundamental problem of a single test, which in our entire society has been banished, basically. I mean, I'll say it again, you don't get into Harvard or Yale through a single test. You don't get into hardly anything anymore through a single test. Why our specialized schools continue to do that makes no sense to me. And I think it throws off the whole equation. We've tried over the years to give, special support, tutoring, help. To some extent, it's an asymmetrical situation. Those who have a lot of resources are always going to get a lot more private help on the outside than anything the public sector can provide. So that's an imperfect equation. I think we found with gifted and talented that it brings value, but it's also inherently limited. The Equity and Excellence vision is trying to create a dynamic where there's much more gifted and talented opportunity across all classrooms. So I still think the root cause here is a broken admission system, and that if we really want to bring everyone in, we need to do what the University of Texas did and fundamentally make sure that every school gets represented with a fair system. And as the Chancellor and I have said, we also need to look at whether we need to expand access to specialized schools, meaning more seats. And also, last thing, convince people, which I think more and more parents are getting, and I got a focus group here if you want to talk to them, but there's a lot of great schools that provide just as good an education as the specialized schools, but that branding reality still hangs out there. And I've talked to a huge number of students and parents who said they didn't go to a specialized school, they went to another school and it actually worked better for them. So all of those. Dave?
Mayor, can you look ahead to the next debates, and are you in this race regardless of whether you're in this debate in Houston or not? And also, can you update us on, I think the last time we saw numbers was 6,700 or 7,000 donors, where you stand?
So I'll say to the bigger question first. I have seen through 2 debates, I think the first one had 24 million viewers, I don't know what the second one had, but I'm sure it was very substantial, an opportunity to say things that I think matter, and a lot of people all over the country have told me mattered, and to have an impact on this discussion, and that's very important. I think the voters, 6 months until anyone votes, by the way, the voters I talk to in those early states, overwhelmingly undecided folks or folks who have only initial preferences. Hear it all the time from actual caucus goers, actual primary voters in those states. I think this is a wide open situation. So the bottom line about the process from this point on, first of all, debates are a part of the picture. A lot of other things are too. In the last week, I did 2 programs that I think, if I've got my math right, between them had 5 million viewers, not because of me, I'm just saying they always have that kind of viewership between Hannity and The Daily Show. There's going to be a lot more of those opportunities, I think. So there's going to be a lot more ways to spread the message and get introduced to people, again, where I think a lot of people are still searching for options and have not made up their mind. So then on to the debates, you've got, just like June, July was the exact same standard, I think something that wasn't well publicized until just the last few days, September, October are the exact same standard. So we've been working and fighting to get into September. It's not there yet. I can be honest about that. I'm not going to go into specific numbers, but it's just not there. We're going to keep working until the final hour because you never know what happens. Bunch of polls still could come in and all sorts of things can happen online. But the October debate will be the exact same standard, but with a month more to develop support. And so from my point of view, and we've seen it with other candidates, there's a certain point for a lot of them where there's suddenly a moment where a whole lot happens online, and you can get those donors very quickly, especially when it's $1 a person. And polling, you know, I've had a lot of polls at 1%. I've had some less. I'm not going to tell a lie, but I've had a lot of polls at 1%. 1% to 2% is not a huge jump.
So you stay regardless and wait until after the October?
Well, I think given, one, that I think the message is getting through more and more, and I'm getting more and more opportunities to spread this message, and a lot of people responding favorably to it. And 2, because there's this second opportunity in October, and I'll remind you, with one of the candidates, he wasn't in June, but he was in July. You know, we're going to keep working for that opportunity.
2 city councilors, Mark Traeger and Corey Johnson, sent a letter to the education department yesterday basically criticizing the DOE for not testing entire school buildings for peeling lead paint and only testing classrooms. A number of experts have also said it makes sense to test other areas of buildings, libraries, cafeterias, those kinds of places. I'm wondering why the city doesn't currently test for lead paint outside of classrooms and whether you think it would be a good idea to do so.
So we're going to keep evaluating everything we do. Now, I'll start, and obviously feel free to jump in. I want to start with the strategic goal. It's 0. This is a Vision 0 approach, and that is backed up by the fact that the city of New York has reduced lead exposure from 2005 to present by 90%. If you look at the number of cases, we have 10% of what we used to have. And even in the last months, as we implemented the plan that Catherine Garcia developed, we see those numbers continuing to go down, which is very, very important. With the schools, from all of the research that we've done so far, there's been a strong protocol, and yet we said, abundance of caution, we're going to go back and review everything in the last year to check all the classrooms, the approaches, dust, paint, chips, everything. Clearly, the dynamics with lead, which I've learned a lot about, and I'm still learning, but I've learned a lot about. It's under 6, so that means 3K, pre-K, kindergarten, and in some cases, first grade. That's where the focus is. That's where the health challenge is. And it is, you have to have meaningful exposure, which means we focus on where kids are the most and where there might be any scenario where they would get that exposure. If you're, for example, walking through a hallway and you're just walking through, you don't get lead chips in your mouth walking through a hallway or lead dust on you walking through a hallway. I mean, there's different realities depending on where you are. The real question is the classrooms. But we're going to look at everything. And the review of the last year is going to help us see if there's other areas we need to go into. So my answer to the council members is I take that as a good faith suggestion that we're going to evaluate. We have to believe there's an actual problem and specific need to go after it, but if we find it, we will. Final point, I would remind everyone that we've seen a lot of progress in the approach to lead in many places. The place we all need to focus energy on, we've been saying this ever since Catherine Garcia put out a report, but I honestly don't see much coverage of it. I would ask people to focus on it because this is something that people need to understand. Private homes are now the #1 challenge. It's not public facilities where there's now a huge amount of energy and focus being put on protecting children. It's private homes where in a lot of cases the lead is not being addressed. That's where a lot more energy needs to go.
And when will that review be completed and who's doing it?
Come on up. You will know the answers to both of those.
So the review that Mayor de Blasio has referenced is underway. As part of our contract, there's a confidentiality clause because you don't want to taint that review. So we expect it to be completed in the coming months. But it's underway.
Will it be public?
Yeah, well, the results we'll be able to talk about, and it's going to inform, as the mayor has said, everything we've done to verify that. Everything we've done is what we feel good practice, but we want to have a third-party external review verify that.
Yes, Ernst & Young is the entity doing it. Hold on, who has not gone? Anyone over here? Yeah?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, on the topic of your campaign, your son is a policy advisor to your campaign.
Yep.
If you were to be elected and go to the White House, would you consider employing him as a White House advisor the same way the current president has done to his daughter and son-in-law?
I don't think there could be two more different people than the current president's daughter and my son Dante, but in every way. But look, he has really been a wonderful presence. He's a guy who worked very hard to get a great education, obviously knows a lot about debating from his very successful debate career, and studied with some great folks in college and brings a lot to the table, and he's been right in the middle of the research, debate prep, and a lot of things. He's been a fantastic contributor. So I don't know what he would do in his future, but I hope he chooses public service because I think he truly has a gift for it. Yes.
John Hickenlooper dropped out today, and when you see other candidates leave the race, does that affect your thinking at all on when you will leave the race? Because, you know, in spite of your contact with voters, your numbers in the polls haven't really gone up. You haven't gotten the requisite number of donors. So does that affect your thinking at all?
No, I just don't accept the premise of the question. I've been doing this work a long time. As you know, I've always been in an underdog position. I think we are dealing with the most unpredictable political environment we've ever seen in our lives. I think things move now on social media that a day or two can make a huge amount of difference. I think all things are possible. And the only thing I'd say to you is as more candidates drop out, there's more opportunity for everyone who remains. So I guess it influences me that way. But no, there's many times, I don't blame any journalists for saying, well, this person said this or this person did that. I learned a long time ago, you don't reference other candidates. You make your decisions based on your own game plan, your own ideas. Yes.
I wanted to go back to Melissa's reporting on the summer camp. I know through your presidential campaign, you touted your managerial experience as a reason why you make a great president, and you just kind of, you called some of the people in your staff, you said it was idiotic, but you're the boss, you're in charge of DYCD, you oversee NYCHA. It seems like this was the most basic, simple thing to do for kids to save parents some time and stress and giving them. So why couldn't you, as the mayor of New York City, follow through and get this going for them?
Well, I understand your question, but I'll flip it on its head because this is what I really feel. When you're mayor of New York City, you have 380,000 employees, dozens of agencies, and you focus first and foremost on the big things. And so what I talk to people around the country, they say, look, if crime's gone down for 6 years, jobs have gone up steadily, and we've been able to do big things for people like pre-K for all, that is the ultimate measure of who you are as a leader and a manager. Now, when a specific bureaucracy screws something up, I agree it's my responsibility to ultimately get it fixed, but I also want to say we all can agree that bureaucracies by their very nature are going to screw things up pretty much everywhere, and we never want to see it happen, and we expect it to be fixed. But I certainly, and I don't accept it ever, and I let everyone have it, and we make changes as a result. But I don't think it's at all possible. In my view, you don't judge someone by whether an agency did something stupid versus what they managed to achieve for 8.6 million people. That's the way I think about it.
If an agency does something well, you want to take the credit for it.
No, I think we're talking about scale. I really feel bad for these kids, which is why I personally said we have to make sure these kids get something better. And I don't belittle at all what they went through. But again, when you're talking about 8.6 million people, the question is, what do you do for huge numbers of people on a regular basis? That's how you ultimately have to be judged.
Can I just jump in as someone being...
I think this is like debate rules. Your story was invoked, so you get 30 seconds to respond.
But is someone being held accountable? Was someone demoted or taken out of their job or fired because of this?
First of all, the first thing we want to do is to fix the situation. And this is the first day that I've been satisfied that they finally have a coherent fix in place. We're going to evaluate who did what to who. I do think multi-agency dynamics don't help, honestly. I think sometimes I don't know if you're a baseball fan, but it's like the classic, the ball is hit the outfielder and 2 or 3 outfielders convene, or converge and all look at each other and the ball falls between them. We see that sometimes when there's more than one agency. I have made very clear to the deputy mayors involved that I expect to understand what happened here, who's responsible, whether it rises to the level of something like a firing or there's some other thing to be fixed. But first, I wanted to get the situation resolved for these kids. Yes.
Just two quick questions. One is one of the rent laws passed by Albany this year set a limit for the application fee for tenants at $20. And we found out that what's happening is brokers feel like that limit doesn't apply to them. It only applies to the landlord. I'm just wondering if that's an issue that you're aware of and that you intend to get involved in some way.
Well, I want to know more about it. I think, look, the rent laws overwhelmingly provide a lot of progress for folks who need affordable housing in this city. But I also think there's a lot of pieces to it, and we're still getting clarity on what the actual ramifications of some of the elements of the law are. So that one, I need to know more. I'll have my team look into it, and we'll be able to give you an answer.
Okay. The other issue is just the reporting on the police precincts where they have vehicles parked in bus stops. We found, I think, 8 out of 24 the first time, and then only 3 of the 8 had corrected it the second time around. Is that something that you've directed them to do something about?
Yeah, this one is another, to take it back to the question of managerial dynamics, when you're trying to get an agency to change something that's been going on for decades. I will be very honest that Rome isn't built in a day, changing the culture of any agency. The fact is, repeatedly, I've made clear to all of our agencies that we have to lead by example. And unless it's an emergency, I want to always say if it's an emergency a situation where our first responders are active, we're not ever going to worry about if they're in a bus stop or not in front of a hydrant or something. But if it's normal course of business, you're not supposed to be in front of a bus stop. You're not supposed to be in front of a hydrant. We need up and down the line precinct commanders and other leaders to make clear that's not acceptable. We're going to keep pounding away on it. I think it's changing. I think it will take some more time, but we're making very clear it's not acceptable.
It's been 5 years since some activists filed a complaint regarding what they say is a lack of educational standards in some ultra-Orthodox yeshivas in the city. Last month, the DOE said that they had finally gotten access at this point to all of these yeshivas. When do you expect that people will be able to know more about what was found and when action might be taken?
Oh, action has been taken. I mean, the Chancellor can jump in. So I think this whole thing should have happened a lot quicker, and I think there should have been no resistance from any yeshiva when we came in a respectful fashion trying to help people to meet the standards and improve their practice. By the way, some were fine, right? Some were fine from the jump. Others were very immediately accepting of suggestions, put them into effect. The ones that hesitated and delayed and constantly pushed off the date, I don't think they did anyone a service. But now that we're in every school, again, Chancellor can speak more eloquently on this than I can, but I think there's generally a spirit of cooperation, and there's been steady progress in a lot of schools.
So the mayor's correct. So there is a lot that's happening with this. So we have visited all of the schools that have been named. We've actually done walkthroughs. We've looked at documents and artifacts. We are in the process now of communicating back with those schools and asking for additional documentation. I will be writing a letter to the commissioner, the state education department, with our findings. As you know, there's new laws in New York State that were passed, and now it's being litigated in the courts. We also have a transition of the commissioner in Albany as well. So there's some complicating factors. That notwithstanding, I want to be absolutely clear that we are working through our Department of Non-Public Schools. Now, it's not just the Shivas, it's all non-public schools, very closely in a way that we have not, at least from what they've said, in recent memory. So we are actively engaged. We are actively collecting artifacts. We are actively in the process of reporting back to the commissioner and then outlining what the next steps are.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, I want to go back to the officer suicides for a moment. If you could say if you have been able to get any understanding of what is happening or what this could be tied to, as we saw suicides in another industry not that long ago with the taxi drivers who were doing the same thing. Now we're seeing it in the police department, and I understand that there's a phenomenon when people commit suicide and close to each other, people who are all in the same field, there's a contagion effect that experts are worried about. What is your understanding about what is happening within the department, other than the fact that obviously the challenges that come with being a police officer?
I think the commissioner can go into a lot more detail than I can, but I'll give you just a few broad points. There is a growing suicide problem in America. Across the board. And if you said to me, what do you think is underlying that? I think it's a combination of the increasingly stressful reality of modern life. I think that's absolutely, all of us are seeing it and feeling it. And it's in too many ways, there's still this horrible stigma about getting help. That even though there's been some progress on that, we're nowhere near where we need to be. So I think that one of the realities we're facing is that the broader horrible challenges and look at the horrible situation with the taxi drivers. Some of them were clearly, financial distress was a big part of it, but what led them to feel so desperate and so without any other option that they turned to suicide, that's a mental health issue. That's not just financial distress. There's something else going on, and it didn't get identified and didn't get treated. So clearly here, that is the case as well. We know our officers do not only very important work, but stressful work. But there's obviously something else going on in each case that gets to that point. And the question is, how do we find people earlier? How do we get them the help they need early? How do we break down the stigma? How do we get others around them to guide them to help? And I think this is why I think the family members are the most crucial piece of the equation in many cases. I think a lot of folks, and that's why I told the story of my dad. I remember people trying to offer him help, and he didn't know how to accept it. He thought it was some sign of weakness to accept help. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, we've been brought up that way. So to break through that, it's going to take a whole lot of work. But I think the other thing, and again, the commissioner can go into a lot more detail, but for example, something as simple as saying, no, there's nothing wrong with having medication. It's not going to compromise your work or your career. Like, that's something that we're increasingly recognize has to be made clearer to our officers, because if there's a misunderstanding out there, that really could be a horrible, horrible contradiction. So I wish I had a more perfect answer than that, but that's what I think we're really experiencing. I'll do two more.
Hi, thanks. So as the Chancellor said, many of us are really eagerly awaiting the School Diversity Advisory Group report,
Yes.
which I understand is coming soon. I was told today and a few other times by the head of the group that there's a plan, a promise to give it to the New York Times as an exclusive first. I would just ask that you use your powers as mayor and the fairness, equity, and transparency, that you would ask that it be given to everyone at the same time, at the same published moment.
Okay, I am not familiar with anything about the timing of exact, I know something's coming soon from the working group, but how they're timing it, I don't have a clue. So,
Discussed with Maya Wiley, let her know that fairness and equity should
I
really.
appreciate your advocacy. I think Freddie is the person that can have that conversation. Yes. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I spoke with a 20-plus year veteran of the NYPD this morning for over 35 minutes. He's clearly in crisis because of a combination of personal stress, a divorce, professional stress, an IA probe. He told me, quote, "I can barely stay alive right now. I can barely keep on my feet. This job makes you miserable." He says the department brass have no idea what the rank and file is going through. He went to the employment assistant division within the department. He's got a 3+ hour round trip commute. Said, "Can you move me to be closer?" They said, "No, it's called highway therapy." They said, "Can I get a weekend day off so I can be with my kids?" They said, "No, you've got 20+ years, retire." He doesn't want to retire. He loves being a cop. So I'm just wondering, clearly these, back to Anna's question, this is a really endemic problem in the department. Can cops look forward to a similar, like with the bike desk, $58 million plan, a whole rollout with the press conference, getting 600 stakeholder groups involved? I mean, what can the rank and file look forward to from your administration in terms of resources and commitment to really tackling this head on?
Whatever it takes. From the first conversation I had with the commissioner, I said whatever it takes to get this fixed and to help people. Look, we're dealing with a horrible, complex reality. You just described very powerfully, and I feel horrible for that officer, all the different things, I think you said it's a he, right? Yeah. All the things he's dealing with. That's a horrible burden, and we want to, in not only the NYPD, but all our agencies, be sympathetic and supportive and helpful and help people get answers. So I think we've got a big problem in our whole society. Our bureaucracies in general are not sensitive to mental health realities. Our society is not sensitive. Our media, not to single you guys out any more than government, we're all in the same boat. So we're trying to address this across the government, the business community, the faith community. This is going to take a lot of work. In terms of NYPD, we would do anything and everything to address the issue. The only thing I can disagree with, I don't walk a 1 mile in this guy's shoes, so I'm not talking about him, but if he feels the brass don't understand, I just remind everyone, our commissioner is a 35-year veteran who started out on a patrol in the subways. I think he has a very keen understanding of the lives of our officers and a tremendous connection to them and sense of feeling what they're feeling and wanting to address it. I think the mental health realities we're dealing with today are different than anything we've experienced previously. So, I mentioned some of the things we're going to do. No matter what the cost, we're going to do whatever it takes to help our officers. Thank you, everyone.
Sound check one more time. Sound check. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. You hear me good? Thumbs up. Thank you.